Hello and welcome to Self-Power Now, where empowering women share their stories and advice about life, work, happiness, love, and success. I'm your host, Debbie Giussoni, and I'm so glad you're here with us today. So sit back and enjoy the show. Today, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, food and nutrition. If any of you know me, you know I'm a huge foodie, but I also like to stay fit and healthy. And food impacts so much of your life, from not only your weight, but also your happiness and your health and how you feel about yourself. And things change as you go through different stages in life. So I am so happy today because we have an expert food and nutrition guest on, and I want to tell you a little bit about her. Her name is Jenn Trepeck, and she has been described as a force of nature in the wellness space. She's an optimal health coach, a podcaster, and also a business consultant. She founded a company called Better Life Now from her own weight management saga, as she says, from kicking her food issues. And don't we all have food issues? Her mission is to teach the nutrition that we never learned that we were supposed to learn, which I always say too, doctors should be involved in this group because they're supposed to be health, advocates, and they should be learning about nutrition as well. In Jenn's podcast, which she calls Salad with a Side of Fries, which sounds like a beautiful meal to me, she talks about making ourselves and our health a priority. Music to my ears. Welcome, Jenn.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
I know. I could talk to you forever because I have always, even from a young teenager, I always really love to get into supplements and health and all that. And then I, as you did, got my integrative health coaching certificate and all that. And we often learn our health issues and what we need to do from our own real life struggles. Tell us a little bit about your food issues. I'm sure the audience can resonate. What's your backstory, basically?
Yeah, for sure. So, I was born in Michigan. I'm just kidding.
That's the big food issue right there. Meat and potatoes. Yeah.
Right. Well, and where I grew up in Michigan is, typical suburbia. Like, it's not farmland,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, I ate a lot of vegetables growing up, but I was a dancer. And so I think, I was more aware of my body than the average person, but I also sort of joke that I was the skinny one in a family of dieters. So you
didn't have a weight problem growing up?
Not until between high school and college.
Okay.
So, but the other side of that was I grew up in a house where the food we were eating was based on whatever the fad diet of the time was. So I was really on a diet my whole life and I didn't know. It was like I said, we always had a lot of vegetables in the house, but I would come home after school and there happened to be Jenny Craig snacks in the closet that looked interesting. So I'd go, Dad, can I eat this?
Yeah.
And he was like, I guess, or, I mean, we also had a refrigerator where the only thing in it was soda and every flavor of soda under the sun.
Oh my gosh.
So, it was a lot of we were the house growing up that had all the food nobody else's parents would buy, so it was like we had all of those things.
Like I was so lucky, although I didn't realize it at the time. My parents were Italian immigrants. And we actually ate so healthy. We had this Mediterranean diet, which everyone says now is the best way to eat. It's so balanced and low fat and olive oil and fish and all this stuff. But growing up, it's I would go to my friend's house and I'd be like, you have tater tots? You have,
right?
I thought that was oh my gosh. Or you get to get McDonald's or
right.
That was a treat for us, or soda.
Exactly. So, then between high school and college, I stopped dancing. It was the first time where I was I had to figure out what to do for activity, right? I remember for the first time, I was gaining weight and I was like, okay, I guess I go to the gym. question mark, right? So
it's that college. What do they call it? The 10 pounds.
Yeah, the
first year of college, freshman
yeah, the
10 or
freshman
something.
15 or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was even before then for me, that summer. And then in college, I was like, okay, I'm starting to gain weight. I know what to do because I watched my family do this my whole life, right? And I tried every diet under the sun, gained and lost, that yo-yo thing over and over. And I remember, like there were times where I felt like I would breathe and gain weight. And I was like, I don't understand. Like, how is this possible? you know? And then, I remember vividly too, I was in the business school at Michigan and we had all of these corporate events and recruiting things. And so even in college, I needed business casual, and business formal clothing. So I'm at the store with my sister. Now, growing up, shopping with my mom and my sister was how we spent time together. And I was that kid where like everything looked good on me. I would have to sit there and like weed out what I wasn't going to get.
Yeah. You must be nice and tall.
So I'm on the taller side.
Yeah.
But then this time I'm in the store with my mom and my sister. And I just broke down in tears in the dressing room because it was like nothing looked good. I didn't feel comfortable in anything. And then finally something fit. And then I looked at the size and I was like, I don't even know who I am. Like,
well,
who is
this happens
person?
to people in their older ages as well.
Totally.
Women after menopause and whatnot, they're like, oh my God, I never had a belly before. Oh my God, I never put, I was always the same weight all my life. And then all of a sudden your body just shifts.
Yep.
Yeah.
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 And so, I was in that place. Right. And I, fast forward, I learned this information. And even when I first learned about it, I was like, no, I don't need whatever you have. Like I've got my thing. My thing was the crazy roller coaster, but I didn't need whatever anybody else had, But I heard this woman tell her story of losing like 150 pounds.
Wow. That's a lot.
And everything she said after that, I did not hear.
Surgery, right?
No surgery, no surgery.
Because a lot of people go down that route too.
Yeah, no. And I've had a number of clients, but that's sort of a separate, can of worms there. But so this woman's telling her story and I was looking at her and I couldn't see where 10 pounds could have been on this woman's body. And she's telling me that like the equivalent of another human was attached to her.
Oh, wow. And
I remember having this moment of like, Jennifer, they know something you don't know because in your mind, that does not compute, And so I learned this information and I was like, how come no one ever taught us this? And why isn't this what we did learn? And I became an insatiable student.
So what you learned was nutritional.
Yeah. I mean, fundamental, nutrition,
your basic stuff, like what to eat. Yeah.
Well, more than what to eat, how to eat. Yes. And that's what no one ever taught us. Right? We're taught 85 bajillion philosophies on what to eat.
Right.
But that's not the answer. Right?
So
that's what got us
how
here.
should we be eating then?
Yeah. So understanding our metabolic health is sort of the prerequisite for total health. It really impacts, and I mean, you're familiar with this from your background, right? We can't look at anything in the body in isolation.
No.
And,
and we can't look at the population as the same because everybody is so individualistic in terms of how they metabolize certain foods and their background and origins and all that stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, the human genome is 99.9% the same. So there are some pieces that are fundamentally human. And then within that 0.1%, there is tremendous variation.
Right.
But a lot of times what we think of as something running in our family is much more a function of a common lifestyle running in your family than actual genetics.
A habit, right.
And more than like culturally, how our lives look, the kinds of activities we have in a day, all of those kinds of things. So, what our sleep patterns are. It's, it goes so much further, but it's fundamentally the other side of all of this is that genetics are not our destiny. Right? More and more, you'll hear people talking about epigenetics, which is really everything we bathe our genes in. So we can, through lifestyle choices, turn the volume up or down on certain genes.
Absolutely.
So even after we hit a certain age in life, or when things start to change at different phases of life, we're not destined, we're not doomed, right? There's a lot that we can do. But so much of what we're taught is eat less, move more. But that's fundamentally not actually how the body works, right? By that approach, it's not, the quality of our food isn't even factored into that. But you don't need a degree to know that, 100 calories of M&Ms versus 100 calories of carrots, our body's going to do very different things.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And going back to the metabolic health piece, our metabolic health, whether we are burning fat or storing fat, is a function of blood sugar. So if our blood sugar is too high and if our blood sugar is too low, we're storing fat. So do you remember the old I Love Lucy episode where Lucy and Ethel are in the candy factory?
Oh, absolutely. Who doesn't?
Right. And they're like
stuffing, the little candies in their mouths.
Exactly. So their job, what they were supposed to do was like wrap the candy, put it back on the conveyor belt for it to go to the next station.
Yeah.
And this was their last chance before they were going to get fired. So it was like an unwrapped candy could not go past them. So when the conveyor belt was coming slow and even, they were fine. When the conveyor belt sped up, they couldn't hack it and they were shoving the candy everywhere.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Our body does the same thing. When food and fuel come at a nice, even pace, right? We produce insulin.
Moderation. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Well, insulin carries all of that fuel to our muscles and our cells to be used. Now, our muscles and our cells can only take in so much fuel at a time and then they close. Right. Everything extra is stored as fat. And extra insulin is stored as fat. So when we choose foods that spike our blood sugar or we've eaten too much at a time, it's like flipping the switch, speeding up that conveyor belt. And now all that extra food, all that extra insulin is like all those candies going into every pocket and corner of your body that it can, right?
Every little cellulite dimple.
Right. The other extreme of if our blood sugar is too low.
Yeah.
Right. So, our infinite caveman wisdom of our bodies doesn't realize that there's a refrigerator full of food that we're choosing not to eat. Rather, if we don't eat for long periods of time or we don't eat enough, our body thinks it's a time of famine and says, you will not kill me.
And it stores fat.
I will survive. Exactly. So the next thing you eat is stored as fat. So what this looks like in real life, right? We sit down at the restaurant. We have the best intentions. We order the steamed fish and vegetables. And we're like, no sauce. I want nothing, right? We're like the golden child of what we've been taught, right?
Yeah.
And then the bread basket comes. We start with that bread. It flips the switch.
Yeah.
Speeds up that conveyor belt. Now our steamed fish and vegetables is being stored as fat.
Yeah.
Other extreme, we don't eat all day. It was crazy, right? We're a little busy. We forget
now back
to
up
eat.
On the bread thing, because I want to what is your feeling about having a little bit of that bread with the steamed fish and vegetables?
I'll get there. So exactly. So give me a second. So
go ahead.
So the other extreme of we haven't eaten all day. Now we're starving, right? We were just busy. Time got away from us.
Yeah.
We order the steamed fish and vegetables, but our body stores it as fat because our body thinks it's a time of famine.
Yeah. You're starving.
So rather Right. So now what you're saying is have a little bit of the bread. So here's how we think about that. High glycemic foods, the foods that are very likely to spike our blood sugar, the bread.
Right.
Think of high glycemic foods as the color red. Low glycemic foods as the color white.
Mm-hmm.
If we mix them together, what color do we get?
Pink.
Pink. Not as red as red. Not as white as white.
Yes.
Better impact on our blood sugar,
Right.
right, than if we had it alone.
Mm-hmm.
Now, even to balance that out, we want to make it a little whiter than pinker. We have less of the bread.
Right.
Right. So the other piece to all of this, life hack, everybody, eat your dessert right after your meal.
Oh my God. I was just going to say that. I
Yeah.
can't believe it. That is exactly what I do. And I've done it all my life. And sometimes I'm full after dinner, but I want something sweet. I have it immediately because I
Yes.
know I already have all this great food in me and this protein and stuff. And that's just going to get right absorbed in with it. And it's not going to spike anything.
So it's exactly.
Yeah.
So separate.
Yeah.
So if we wait, then we're like sugar bombing our body.
Yes. Yes.
If
exactly.
we have, and when we have it right after, we're likely going to eat a little less too.
Yes.
So
exactly.
It all works together.
I totally love this. I love that advice. And I have been practicing that for that reason. But it's also the way I think maybe also the way we grew up in my family, we had a little sweet after the meal all the time. You know, we didn't wait 5 hours later or whatnot. So,
and it's all of that whole, you know, we talk about culturally and habits and these behaviors and things that we learn. Like we've been taught dessert's the enemy. Like who said that? Right. you know,
I never
and
say
how
that.
we define it. Right. But how we define it and how we have it.
Yes.
Is very different. Right. That's the how versus the what. The what would say, right, eat this, not that.
Well, yeah, and most diets right now are based on the what, and you're totally right. I'm glad you mentioned that because if you go out there and look at any of the I call it diet du jour that's out there, and people are like, "Oh, I lost 50 pounds," or "I lost this." You'll notice that there's always like one big elimination. Like you cannot have this, whatever it is, whether it's sugar, whether it's gluten, whether it's, you know, if it's meat, if you want to do vegan and whatnot. Anytime you do that major elimination, I think, yeah, you're going to lose, but you know, you're cheating your body out of what it needs.
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, there's sort of, there's a few factors in that, right? So the bottom line, if what we're looking at is the number on the scale, any diet will work. You don't need what I'm saying.
Yes.
Any
but it's not
diet,
sustainable,
every
right?
diet. Well, so there's two factors, right? Any diet will work. The question becomes, how long-term is it? And how healthful is it? Because most of the time, when we cut out whole food groups, cut calories, you know, focus on just one piece of it or all the things that we've done before, right? The pattern is we do the things, it's working, the number on the scale goes down.
Yeah.
Then it stops. And we're like, what the heck happened? Right? We get annoyed.
And
we start to go back to old eating habits.
Yeah.
And the number on the scale goes back up.
Yes.
What's actually happening on our body when we do that? The number on the scale is going down. What we're losing when we look at body composition is water, muscle, and sometimes bone. So then when we go back to
very dangerous.
Yeah. Then when we go back to old eating habits, we have less muscle on our body to be burning that extra fuel. P.S. If you're a note taker, write this down. Muscle dictates metabolism.
Yes.
Right. So
more muscle, you burn
we lose
faster.
it.
Yeah.
We lose it as water and muscle. Now we go back to the old eating habits. We're gaining that weight back, but we have less muscle on our body that needs that fuel. We gain it back as fat. So we lose it as water and muscle, gain it back as fat. Lose it as water and muscle, gain it back as fat. So we might end up at each yo-yo as the same number on the scale.
Yes.
But by body composition, we are fatter at that same number.
Yeah.
So measuring our progress by the number on the scale is one of the red flags, one of the things that I call inappropriate barometers, right? Anytime we look at the scale, we don't want to look at it in isolation.
Yeah.
So we look at the scale, right? The total number. We look at body fat percentage and all of our tape measurements, right? So also once a month.
Yeah.
Once a month, we do all of those measurements. Other than that, divorce the scale.
Yes.
Right.
Agreed.
Like we don't need it every day. We don't need it every week.
It's so bad for self-confidence too. It's just, and it's always kind of on your mind then constantly. And
right. We might think we're doing great.
Yeah.
We might think we're doing great. Then we get on the scale and it's not what we expected. And now we are angry and we are frustrated and we're in a sour mood. But 5 minutes before that, we were on fire. Right? Yes. It doesn't. So there's a few pieces to that. One is, right, we need to separate our measure of progress and what we're doing from the scale, which is why we want more information and why we want to rely less on the scale and not get on it as often helps with that. But it's also about understanding what it's actually telling us. And we can avoid a lot of those small natural fluctuations by looking at things just once a month.
Right. And what about, people have, I always say, what's your relationship with food? People have this relationship with
complicated.
Food. Yeah. It's a very complicated relationship because some people that have been dieting all their lives have this very negative view of food, that it's bad, that food is bad. And that starts at a very early age in life. And that's a hard habit to break. You have to kind of really go down deep and figure out, what is my relationship to food? Do I love food for its nutritional value, for the way it makes me feel, or do I have this like hate relationship with it?
Yes. At the same time, if you ask somebody that question, they're going to go, I don't effing know. Go away. Right.
Yeah. It takes a little bit of introspective work. Yeah.
Well, so the way that we do that is by working together, right? Not doing this alone, but also starting with the nuts and bolts, the chemistry part of it. And then those other things reveal themselves. Right. So, some of you may be familiar with the vagus nerve.
Yes.
Right. So the vagus nerve is the literal connection between the gut and the brain.
Yeah.
Okay. Think of it like a 5-lane highway. 3 of the lanes go gut to brain. 2 for 5 lanes, right? 3 are going gut to brain. 2 are going brain to gut. You will never outthink the chemistry of what you are putting in your body. It's impossible. It's not going to happen. So when we start with some of the nuts and bolts on the food stuff and we clean up that chemistry, the other stuff gets very clear very quickly. And then we can address it without feeling like it's climbing Mount Everest naked and barefoot.
I know for me, one of my issues since childhood, and I've never had a weight problem, and I've tried to be as healthy as possible, but I know that I have this one issue, and that is finishing everything on my plate.
Oh yeah. There are starving children somewhere in the world, and your plate is responsible.
And also, I grew up in a very, not severely underprivileged, but we were struggling. And so food, was never wasted or anything like that. So finishing what do you do for people like me who kind of grew up with that mentality?
Yeah. Well, so a piece of it is even just to set, like at the beginning, right? Remember, everything in our shifting habits is a progression, right? The choices and what we're willing to do today are different than where we might be in a month or 6 months. So to start, maybe becomes a function of just use a smaller plate while we deal with some of the other things.
Yeah.
The other side of that is, if what's on your plate is protein, fiber, and quality fat, finish it. Your body can self-regulate protein, fiber, quality fat, quality nutrition. Your body can self-regulate, right? Yeah. You'll know when you're full. You can save your leftovers, or not.
Mm-hmm.
And the part of it is also then a piece of saying, okay, well, what was the story I was told? Is it wasteful? Well, let's redefine waste. Me eating it doesn't make it less wasteful.
Yeah,
I don't
especially
need
if
it
you're going to eat it the
either.
next day for lunch. Where
Right.
I
Or
have the
even if,
big,
even
yeah,
if you're not, right, and it's
yeah.
going to go in the garbage,
Mm-hmm.
right? Well, putting it in my body when I don't need it is just as much garbage
It's just as
as it
much
is in the
wasteful. Yeah,
trash,
yeah.
right?
I have a little tip for people. I think where I find this the most troubling, finishing the plate is at restaurants. At home, you're right. You can take a smaller plate, you can take smaller portions, you can just put it in the fridge for the next day. But in a
Yep.
restaurant, you feel like, oh my gosh, and they always serve you more food than you need in restaurants, is to just take your plate, your food, and if you think that there really is a little bit too much, because restaurants are always going to cook with a lot more fat and a lot more salt and than you would normally do at home, is to just put that half aside
Yeah.
right from the
And a
beginning.
lot of people
Yeah,
will do that,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it's sort of, a lot of us have heard that before, and sometimes it's easier said than done, right?
Hmm.
The
Yeah,
other
when
side
it's
of
in
it
front of you,
is,
yeah. Unless you
right.
ask for the to-go box when you get the meal
Yeah, which
and then
some
put it
people
in the to-go
do.
box right
Sure.
away.
And some people do, right? But again, if what we're choosing, protein, clean, lean protein, I don't care, animal, plant, whatever, you do you, clean, lean
Hmm.
protein.
Yeah,
Fiber
yeah.
is vegetables and sometimes fruit,
Hmm.
right? And quality fat. So if those are the foods that you're having and we overindulge, fine,
It's
onward,
okay. Yeah.
right? Part of the process is learning our own hunger and satiety signals, relearning what that feels like, because most of us don't really know. We've like taught ourselves out of that.
Well, we don't know when
Um,
to stop either. And I also think if you eat a little bit slower, you know when to stop.
well, so
Yeah.
there's a few pieces to that. So one piece is
Mm.
awareness, certainly. Another piece is giving your body time to communicate. And another piece of that is very chemical. So there is a hormone that tells us when we're satisfied.
Mhm.
It's called leptin. Same way we can become insulin resistant, right? We know that to be diabetes. We can become resistant to leptin, the hormone that tells us when we're satisfied.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
So, and the
Mm.
same thing can happen with ghrelin, the hormone that tells us when we're hungry. So if you feel like once you start eating, you can't stop,
Mhm.
it's very chemical. It's not, you are not a moral failing. It is not your lack of willpower. It is very chemical. And
So
so
how
the
do you
same
get
thing,
around that?
so we help retrain the body. So we can use
Mm.
nutrients like there's an ingredient called leptocore, white kidney bean extract, chromium, some things that we can use to help our body respond properly to
Mhm.
leptin and ghrelin. Ghrelin's the hormone that tells us when we're hungry. So if you feel
Right.
like you're never hungry, ghrelin resistance. And then once we
I
start
have
eating, we
never
can't
met
stop.
someone who
We have
feels like they're
leptin,
never hungry.
right? But it's sort of that, like, I'm not hungry and then I eat something and it's, you know,
Yeah.
open the trap. It's like, was that
Right.
Garfield the cat, right? Where
Yeah.
like all the food just pours in, right? Like when we live in these extremes, that can be evidence of leptin and ghrelin resistance.
Yes.
So we
Yes.
can start to work with our body and, eating, portion sizes and things like that when we're eating out versus at home tend to be very different conversations mentally, right?
Mhm.
One at home might be about waste. At the restaurant, it's often less about waste and more about something else. So part of it is also, like you were saying before, it's digging into all these pieces and these elements. But fundamentally, when we start with the chemical stuff, when we start with, the food, the other things reveal themselves. And we
Mhm.
can logically approach it and over time learn to identify our own signals of
Mhm.
satiety and when is enough enough. P.S. Your first signal is usually that moment where
When your
you stop
stomach
eating
hurts.
and you stop. No, our first moment is we're eating. And naturally, everybody gets there. We have this moment where we sigh.
Interesting.
That is generally the first sign of getting towards satisfied.
I don't know. I think about maybe I sigh when I see my food. I'm so happy when the food
And
comes.
then
I'm like,
after we start eating, you'll eat a little bit, right? You'll eat a little
ah.
bit, and then you'll put your fork down and you'll take a deep breath,
Yeah.
right? But it's starting to notice what those things feel like. When are we getting to that point?
Yeah.
What does it feel like to be satisfied and content? Like, I could probably eat a little more, but I'm okay.
Yeah. Do you think it's helpful for people as they're trying to analyze, okay, what are my issues or where are they coming from or how I can correct them, to just take a journey, write down, right? Write down, okay, this is what happened today when I'm eating, and here's where I felt full, but I ate more and then I didn't feel good, and then whatever. Is journaling helpful?
1,000%, but it's about what we're tracking,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, you're
So
not adding up your calories. It's yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And
It's
so
not that kind of
more
journaling.
no. And even the hunger pieces, like, we don't necessarily have to put it all together on one page, right? Like, we can have
Mhm.
one page that's, you know, this is the time, this is what I had, you
Mhm.
know, check
Right,
off your
right, right.
water,
Right, it is
you
good
know,
to
and
keep a
then
log of what you're eating for sure, for sure. Yeah, and how you're
on a
feeling.
separate
Yeah.
place, we can say, this was the most stressful part of my day. This is
Mhm.
what happened. We don't want to look at it immediately,
Mhm.
which is why we want to write it down. We want to give
How
it some time.
what, 24 hours a week, what?
Yeah, typically look
Yeah.
back over a week, maybe
Mhm.
2 weeks, because
Mhm.
what we're looking for are patterns. We're not
Yes.
looking for the food police, right? I say to
Yeah.
everybody, like, I'm not your food police, right?
Yeah.
I'm here to help identify the patterns.
Yeah.
And what's also most interesting is that when we have, whether it's indigestion or some symptom, it can often be connected to something that we ate up to 72 hours prior.
Right.
We don't
Especially
connect the
certain things
dots.
don't even digest. Yeah, like red meat
Right.
takes a long time to digest. We used to say,
So
I love, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, no, no. So I was just going to say, like, so the point of writing it down is that then we could say, okay, what are all of the days where I had heartburn?
Mhm.
What did the day before all those days look like? What did 2 days before all those days look like? What did 3
Right.
days before all those days look like? We're not going to remember all that. We think we will, but we're not.
No, we're not. We're not. We're not.
And so it's about identifying the patterns more than looking at any one day of saying, was this good or bad? Was I on plan or off? Right? Those are
Yes,
words that I
yes,
don't use, by the way.
yes. Well, when I first met you on that conference and I heard about your podcast, Salad with a Side of Fries, that really spoke to me because when I was doing my health coach certification and nutrition at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, actually, we had this 90-10 approach, which was, 90% of the
Yep.
time, you try to eat really healthy. And then, 10%, you've got to give yourself a little bit of leeway. And it speaks to everything that you've been talking about, the moderation and not depriving, because if you start depriving yourself too much, you're only going to go back in a bigger way, right? And
Right.
start eating those foods. But given that approach, are there any diets out there that you think are sustainable?
So I'm not a big fan of the word diet in
Yeah, yeah.
general,
Way
right?
of how about way of eating?
So yeah, so what I teach everybody, right? Protein and fiber at every meal makes removing fat no big deal,
Mhm. Oh, I like that. Say that
right?
again.
So protein and fiber at every meal makes removing fat no big deal. So protein is clean, lean protein.
Yes.
Fiber is vegetables and sometimes fruit,
Mhm.
right? Quality fat. P.S. A serving of avocado is half an avocado,
Oh,
not
yeah.
like,
Oh my gosh. Or a
the quarter
quarter.
of an
Yeah.
eighth of a sliver,
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I could
um,
eat a whole avocado, but I try not. I try to go half or quarter in my salads and
yeah.
stuff.
And we want to have quality fat a few times a day,
Mhm.
So if that's fundamentally where we're starting,
Mhm.
things will fall into place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beyond that, eat what you like. Don't eat what you don't like.
Yes. Even if it's
Try
good.
new
Yeah.
foods.
Yes.
Yeah. And, try new foods. Like, trying to remember, there was a training I did, now it was probably 15 years ago, where there was a study where you had to try food like it was like 127 or 172 times before you actually know if you like something or not,
Yes,
you know?
yes.
And part of it is our taste buds change over time. Our taste buds can change in as little as a week. Our taste buds adjust depending on what we're eating. And
Mm.
then is it, even if it's like when I work with kids and families, because I have a kids and family program too. I mean, part of it is like, okay, we tried it, you know, roasted. Did we try it grilled? Did we try it steamed? Did we try it with marinara sauce? Did we try
Yeah,
it with
because it'll
cheese? Did
taste
we try
different.
it with
Yeah,
pesto? Did we try,
exactly.
right?
Yeah,
Like there's a texture thing, there's a flavor thing. And so all the different ways that we
yeah.
could try something
Especially with
count.
kids. I mean, I remember
Right.
growing up, my parents used to say, just try it. You have to try it. If you don't like it, then you don't have to eat it, but you have to
Yeah.
try it. And a lot of people, didn't grow up that way. I was really lucky, but it's important. You're
And
right. Try
part of it
it,
is
try it
like the
different
way we've
ways
tried
too.
it.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
I
that's just
mean,
it. I feel like a lot of times we tried something and it was like
yeah.
cooked to smithereens and we were like,
Oh
this
my
is
gosh,
gross.
yeah, or
Right.
people that grew up with really mushy vegetables.
Right.
Vegetables are one category where, you meet people even in, their older age. Oh no, I'm not a big vegetable person or whatever. But I find that, it depends on how you make those vegetables. If you throw them in a
Totally.
roasting pan with a little olive oil and salt and pepper, oh my God, they transform. The whole taste transforms.
Yeah.
And you might like that vegetable,
Right.
again.
So that's the piece, right? I mean, within this framework of quality nutrition, play with it,
Yes.
see what you like,
Yeah.
but protein and fiber and quality fat are the staples. And
Yes.
then from there, it's very much, personal preference and what works for somebody
Yeah.
and all of those kinds of
And
things.
some of the ancestral things that you used to too. What about medical tests? Before people embark on kind of a lifestyle food change, do you recommend any medical tests that they should
Yeah, I
take?
mean, people can certainly work with their healthcare providers. I have a lot of clients who will bring me their lab work and will,
Hmm.
assess it. The one thing I'll say to everybody too, when they, if their doctor, they do the lab work and then their doctor is inclined to put them on medication, I would say, ask them for 12 weeks.
Yes. Yes.
Give me 3 months to work on this. And then let's do this again.
Hmm. Hmm. Any
I've
supplements that
rarely
you?
had, yeah, I do a lot in my practice with supplementation, but it's just as with everything, it's very personalized.
Yes.
And a
Yes.
lot of times, you know, a lot of times people too will get the lab work and their inclination is to go right to the supplements.
Hmm.
And the reality is we cannot supplement our way out of poor nutrition. And a
Yes.
lot of times we can start with the nutrition and some strategic supplementation. And a lot of times the supplements that you were maybe inclined to start with
Hmm.
maybe aren't necessarily the one. So it makes the argument, I think, for working with somebody and having some conversations with somebody who is pretty well versed in understanding supplementation and functional
Hmm.
nutrition
Right.
so that you're being really smart about it and strategic about it because we don't want to spend money where we don't need it, whether that's on food
Exactly,
or on
yeah. We
supplements.
had a whole show on
Yeah.
just functional medicine as well with a functional
Yeah.
medicine doctor. It's really important. I mean, you could start peeling that onion and go in so many
Right.
different directions. So you really
And
need
the other
to be
side of
with an
it, oh,
expert. Yeah,
yeah, and the other
yeah,
side of it is like you don't have to go do blood work. You know. And I think that's another piece
yeah.
of whether it's our medical system or the diet world, everyone is trying to tell you that they have the answer and you don't know.
Hmm.
You know.
Well, you know what makes you feel good, and you know what doesn't make you feel good, and
And
that
if
might
and
not be the same for every person, right?
right. And a
Yeah.
lot of times like if something's off and your doctor says but everything in here looks okay, right? But
Hmm.
if something's off, you
Yes.
don't have to accept those
Yeah.
answers.
Know
And the
your
other
body.
side of that is, and the other side of that is if you don't know what feeling good feels like, let's talk, right? Because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times we get to this point where we go, I don't know I don't remember. You mean I'm supposed to wake up and not need coffee to function? I don't know. I'm sorry. What?
Oh my God.
Right?
Most people would say yes. Well, let's just pivot real quick before we end. I wanted to just ask you personally, what is your wellness practices? What are they like during the course of a day? Because, wellness is not just nutrition, obviously. It's a lot of other
100%.
things. So tell us in a nutshell, what Jenn's wellness practices are.
So, I move every day.
Yes.
I meditate every day.
All right.
I fuel myself with nutrition every day. I take supplements every day. I have a gratitude journal. So every night, and I like to do, a lot of people like in the morning. I like it before bed. It is on my nightstand. It is the last thing I do.
Me too.
I write down 5 things that I'm grateful for that day. And it helps.
I actually don't write it down. I actually just do it in my head and it helps me fall asleep. I mean, I just keep going through the day, and sometimes it's just little things like, oh, the sun was beautiful or whatnot.
Yes.
It just
I have those moments
so good about life, right?
Exactly. Well, and I have those moments like I live in New York City where it's like the train came exactly when I got to the bottom of the steps, or like everything today was on time.
Yeah.
Or it didn't rain when I had to be outside. Those little things. And I love writing it down because then you can go back and look at it later, even if you never do. Years later, you go look at a random day,
Yeah. And say,
so,
wow,
and
I have
by
the best
way,
life ever.
And I like also 5 things because it pushes us a little bit.
Yes.
I have a client who was resistant to the gratitude journal, and he's like, well, I'll do 2. And I was like, you can do better. Right.
You can't pick 5 things in a day. I mean, just even, oh my God, I had legs to walk on, like really. Wow. Anyway, thank you, Jenn, for your presence here today. And
thank you.
All your insight. I think we could, as I said in the beginning, probably talk forever because you're just chock full of information. Listeners, you can find links to connect with Jenn today on our site, on the podcast page, or hear more shows or sign up for free gifts on selfpowernow.com. I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful day, and come back and join us next time. Thanks for listening to Self Power Now. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with others, follow it on your favorite podcast platform, and join our community on selfpowernow.com and receive 3 free happiness gifts. And while you're there, if you're looking for more ways to be happy, healthy, peaceful, and loved, check out my books and new online courses. Until next time, this is Debbie Jasoni wishing you self-power now.